Welcome, everyone, to the second episode of Bridging the Gap to Web3 Beyond the Hype. And we're thrilled that you are here. My name is Chris Haug. I am the director of the Columbia Mid-Maryland chapter of the global organization Startup Grind. And for those of you who do not know who we are the largest global community of innovators, creators, technologists, startups, and high growth companies. We have 5+ million members in 650 chapters and 140 countries around the world. And since our founding in 2010, we have helped more than 6,000 startups grow and expand and raise close to $4 billion in follow-on capital. A little bit about us. Our mission is very simple. We're here to educate, inspire, and connect our community members with the resources that they need to have the greatest opportunities to go as far in their entrepreneurship journey as they possibly can. And we live by three very simple core values. We're here to give first, not take. We're here to help others before we help ourselves. And we're here to make friends, partnerships, and find every way possible to collaborate with one another to create net positive sum games for all concerned and not practice the typical business-oriented zero-sum win-lose. So like I said, ladies and gentlemen, we're thrilled that you are here. Thank you for joining. I would like to thank a couple of people who are part of my team, specifically Mr. Patrick Rockhill. I want to thank you, Patrick, for being part of this evening, and also our dear America's community manager, Madeline, thank you very much for attending and being part of this. I also would like to recognize Mr. Lee Blaylock. Lee is a fellow chapter director from down in the Texas area. Welcome, Lee. And let's see. My goodness, I've got more people here than I could possibly want to be able to introduce without taking up all the time. That being said, I do want to say thank you to several key organizations. Number one, to the Startup Grind global community for putting together this platform that we're on this evening and fully embracing the concept of Web3 as a strategic initiative going forward starting January of this year. I would also like to thank our local sponsors, TEDCO, which is the Maryland's quasi-public-private partnership responsible for helping to bring new technologies to market. 360 Venture Management Group. I'd also like to thank Atlantis Capital Partners for their contributions, as well as our guest tonight, Mr. Dave Guillen with Dominant Creative, and also VChain, as well as last but not least, I'm drawing a blank here, just a second, Safe Haven, and also Startup Guides. So for all of those who are here, thank you. And Luke and Connor, I am going to turn the show over to you and take it away.
Excited to be here. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 2 of Bridging the Gap to Web3. It's great to be back with you all. We got a new topic that we're going to be diving into. My name's Connor Boundy. I'm here with one of our co-founders at Atlantis Partners, Luke Pillarella, and we'll be diving into some things here that I think a lot of you are going to be excited to talk about. Luke, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling great, Connor. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I think that we've got a really exciting conversation ahead of us with two great guests. Welcome back to all of our previous attendees. Welcome to new faces. You know, we are excited if you are returning from our previous episode that aired last month, where we featured Dave G of Startup Guides and Tyler Dusan of Safe Haven, where we discussed all things Fourth Industrial Revolution. We were able to cover high-level topics such as NFTs and education, ownership of your data, and really how you can get involved today. If you weren't able to view the live event, feel free to go out on YouTube, visit our recording link and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. It'd be great to hear from you.
Yeah, I had a great time last episode. It was amazing to hear these perspectives of just individuals who are truly changing the world and understand how. And the best part, we get to do it all again today. And we've got two new amazing guest speakers for this episode where we're going to be diving into something that personally I feel like we should be talking more about. The real world utility that's really not being talked about in the mainstream media behind Web3 today. And I don't really know why.
I think you bring up an interesting point there, Connor. I know, as recently what's been making the news is a lot of venture capital funding coming into this new asset class. But prior to that, really what the media craze was about was these get rich quick schemes, this money craze around profile picture NFTs that then turned into some play to earn metaverse video game with maybe some token launch at the end. But that's really what the media has been focused on. However, if we're able to look beyond that hype and really see what technology capabilities are being created, the abilities of immutability, ownership, and verify the ability to verify one of the most valuable assets arguably in the world today of data.
I think just the hard part there, though, like you were saying at the beginning, is jumping past all of the VC money, all of the money that's being made in this space, and looking beyond that. And I think that's because we haven't been able to tell the right story to our audience and effectively tell the story of what Web3 really is. Because if we can tell that story the right way and get people educated on the value that Web3 can bring them, well, I think that's one of the keys to mass adoption. And I think that's one of the keys to growth of the space. And so, like I said, I know we got two guest speakers here that are going to help us kind of tell that story. And they're going to help us tell the story from two sides of the bridge that exists. One from Web 2, one from Web 3. So why don't we bring up our speakers, Luke? Let's get David and Demetrius up here.
Yeah, I agreed to start. Let's introduce our Web 2 speaker, David Gielan. David Guillen is the CEO and co-founder of Dominant Creative, which is a global creative agency and production company. David is a serial entrepreneur and business owner with multiple successful startup exits. And in his most recent venture, David's really focused on assisting businesses with creative branding and strategy execution. So David, welcome to Bridging the Gap to Web3. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, gentlemen, for having me. I appreciate it, and looking forward to a fruitful discussion.
Of course, it's always a pleasure when we get on the line with you, David. And as for our next guest, we've got Demetrius Neocleos joining us from VeChain Foundation. VeChain is a leading public blockchain focused on solving real-world economic problems. A quick disclaimer out there that Connor and I are both holders of VeChain's native tokens, VET and VTHO. Demetrius has a background in legal and has provided a variety of legal and compliance advice to blockchain companies across Europe. And in his current role, he serves as the UK and EU ecosystem manager for VeChain, where he really facilitates the adoption of VeChain enterprise systems and solutions across Europe. Well, Demetrius, how are you doing today? Welcome to our event.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for organizing that. And thank you, Startup Grind. Thank you, Luke, Connor, Chris, and of course, David. It's a great pleasure to be here on stage with you. Actually, I'm doing well. Almost midnight here in London, but almost a bit late. But I'm so hyped about this panel discussion today.
Would you say you're beyond hyped?
So
let's get ready.
Beyond the hype, yeah. Because I think tonight we are going to go beyond the hype and be more pragmatic and having a discussion where utility comes, and also sharing insights and knowledge with the public that I think has been misinformed, but also ourselves included, I think, from the Web3 and the industry, who have over-abused the terminology of Web3, but also NFTs. But I'm going to put a stop here. Yeah.
I was going to say, you're already getting us excited for what we're going to get ready to dive into. And we are going to dive into a lot, like you just mentioned. I mean, David, curious to hear from your perspective. What are you excited to dive into today before we get started?
Well, anytime I have an opportunity to talk to people, who are knee deep in the field and understand this technology far better than I ever will, it's always a good day. I think hype is something that I've seen a lot of people get suckered in by, and they have lost their shirts. They've lost a lot of cash, and they're not paying attention. So when you have an industry that is relatively new and with a lack of understanding in the public space, it's important to have real world conversations, practical discussions about what this means to the average person, so that they can, sidestep some of these potential issues that they may run into in the future. So I appreciate so much the fact that you guys are putting this on, and Demetrius, get a chance to chat with you is always a pleasure. So thank you. And Chris, of course, thank you for having me.
Well, I think that hit it on the head. And I think it's going to be an awesome discussion diving into some of the things. And let's start with you, David, because obviously you've been able to help some pretty powerful brands tell their story. I mean, you've worked with Adult Swim in your past, you've worked with DraftKings, you worked with Aunt Jemima. I mean, you've seen it all. And you've kind of seen all of these different brands tell their story and use different brand strategies to tell that story effectively. And so I'd love to get a better understanding of how you're helping these individuals tell their story and what you're seeing when it comes to telling their story.
Well, first of all, thank you for making me feel old. I appreciate that. It's always good to be feel like the elder statesman on the call. I was thinking about what we were going to be talking about this evening, and I was thinking back to earlier stages of my career, even before I was really in marketing, but working at agencies. Long ago, I was a biller at Chiat Day, paying Nissan invoices and all kinds of other things. But just being in that environment, I feel like I got to see, when social first was in the initial idea for every campaign. I remember the 1984 Apple campaign. I remember how that rolled into Think Differently. Really powerful, a lot of powerful branding initiatives that have gone to market and made a huge impact. I mean, if you take Apple specifically, I mean, that was the first time that anybody had ever considered a technology company to be a luxury brand. And that's they're redefining themselves. They redefine themselves as how you can even think about the industry as a whole. And that's through a branding exercise. I know a lot of people feel like, oh, marketing, it's always coming at me, and it can be kind of annoying at times. But I think we've seen some really significant shifts in the way that marketing has leveraged sort of what a brand identity really can be. I know we were talking earlier about, sort of aligning yourself with a tribe. Like, what does brand identity really mean to you? And it comes down to, does this organization align with me, who I am and who I consider myself to be, and how can I connect with that by draping that logo on my clothes or driving that car? What does that really mean? I think about brands like Nike. Nike doesn't sell you shoes when they put an ad out. They don't really do that. When Nike puts out an ad, they talk about celebrating athletes, celebrating excellence in sports. That's really what they are doing. They're not trying to sell you shoes. They're selling you an identity, and something to believe in, something to feel passionate by. And if they were just saying like, oh, here are the new cool laces, like you don't care. Other brands do that with moderate success. So I see a lot of changes in the industry over the years. I've seen a lot of subsequent branding that has made been some terrible choices and some things that really sort of fell off. It's funny, I'm actually drinking Liquid Death right now, and to me, this is like one of the greatest examples of exceptional marketing that I've seen in the last 20 years. It was started by a marketer. He wasn't really passionate about like water, but he got tired of not being able to do the fun kind of marketing and build a brand identity that he wanted, was what he wanted to see in the market. So he took it upon himself to develop a product to do that, and they've put out some of the funniest and most effective marketing that I've seen in a long time. So yeah, I think there have been a lot of great things over the years, and I've also seen a lot of missteps, which I won't get into. But one of the startups that I'm advising on right now is this company called Tribify. And what I really find exciting about what they're doing is they are, and this I think parlays into the NFT conversation, because they're trying to find real world utility out of what they're doing. They're an app that connects through interests on the app to then go out and live that in the real world. So they have, if you're really passionate about hiking, you meet on the app, you join a hiking group, and then you go out into the real world and utilize it. And so what they're doing right now to bring value to the world, and I think it's something that we all can get behind, is they are actively trying to bring value to the Ukrainian refugee crisis by connecting Ukrainian refugees with opportunities and places to stay, jobs, whatever it is, resources around the world through their app. And so when I think about brands that I can really get behind and brands that their brand really means something, I look at companies like that. Are they giving an opportunity to really believe in what they're doing? And that's that's somebody that I would wear a T-shirt and want to feel like I'm supporting.
Well, and it's just the simple concept of it's something that you value, and it makes you feel like it's bigger than you. It's bigger
Absolutely.
than just this. And I mean, that's kind of what these brands are doing. Like you're saying, Nike, they're not selling you a shoe, they're selling you a lifestyle. I mean, it's even as simple when you go to examples of like the medicines that are being advertised, and it's somebody running through a field, frolicking, all happy. It's like, here are all the symptoms that we're just going to list for the next 30 seconds of the ad. But they're selling a lifestyle. They're not selling what this thing is going to do. It's going to allow you to do all of this. You're going to become part of this ecosystem that's bigger than you today.
Yeah. And ultimately, like us as the consumer too, we really get to embody the mission, vision, value of those organizations and show that that's something that we stand for. And so I think that this is an interesting segue that I want to bring up, Demetrius. Like clearly VeChain, right, from being a developable blockchain is trying to solve, real world economic problems. Could you, give us some insights on like what's really that true mission, vision, value around VeChain, and like us as consumers or users of the platform, how are we able to better embody the goal that you're trying to reach from as an organization level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, VeChain is a layer one platform, which means it's like Ethereum. It's an EVM base, so anything that is built on Ethereum, you can build it on VeChain using Solidity. It's important to mention this, but in a way that is more friendly to the environment, which I think is very important, especially nowadays, because we have a duty as society for sustainability, also to preserve the planet, and at the same time, when we have cheap transactions, which is very important nowadays, because when in VeChain we're promoting lower the barrier of entry, and lower the barrier of entry, it comes also to the cost, to the economic detriment of the developers, but also to the tools. So we're also bringing the tools on the preface, and we remove the barrier of entry through the fee delegation, which means that you can use a blockchain solution, you can build your blockchain solution without even touching the crypto. Or we have also developed a SaaS solution, the toolchain, that enables you to build your solution without even touching the smart contract. Something that is absent from the as a whole. But we're trying to be also down to earth. Whereas our competitors are more into the media and promoting and FOMO, all that stuff, we promote our tools, we promote our community and the use cases. For example, use cases that came up and are coming up from our strategic partners like DNV and PwC, and that they're bringing real value to the society, but also to the environment. So I think that is important, that differentiates us, and we're trying to promote it in a very humble and very pragmatic way, other than the other crypto projects that we are seeing around.
I think that's interesting that you bring up, because definitely, being a frequent member on crypto Twitter and seeing the various news outlets around Solana or Ethereum or Avalanche, Cosmos, any of these big layer ones. I mean, Demetrius, taking that humble approach, like where is VeChain really kind of announcing that those values that they create, right? The cheap transactions, the good for the environment, lower barriers to entry. Where is that information really being displayed, and how are you communicating that to the audience that you're trying to reach?
Well, we're sharing all that information, of course, through our official accounts on Twitter, on Telegram, on Discord. We also have partnership with Demetrius University, the fellowship, and also organizing VeChain hackathons. and the VC grant foundation, the VC Foundation grant that is given for the developers. So in every possibility and opportunity, we promote in the best possible way, and also through the use cases. I think what is missing from the industry is like use cases that promote the technology, that there is a value from the use cases, and this is what we have been doing. It's an old saying: actions speak louder than words, isn't it?
Spot on. Me and Luke always talk about that. One of our big things when looking into startup companies, looking into projects, looking into anything, is are they talking the talk or are they walking the walk? And I believe that's something that Web3 loves to talk. The entire ecosystem loves to talk about, we're changing the world, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. But those visions are huge. How are you actually executing on your mission to get to that vision? I think that's something that has been really fascinating, watching VeChain kind of tell your story from the first users you were able to get to being a world-class blockchain right now. And so, I'd love to hear from David and hear kind of the way that you've been able to help some startups tell their story and get those first new users like a VeChain a few years ago, and how that story has changed over the growth of them walking the walk. Have you been able to see any patterns?
Yeah, I think, I think VeChain is one of those organizations that's doing a better job than most at storytelling, which is nice. It's refreshing to see. One of the things that I think new companies struggle with is what their messaging needs to be focused on is education. And so they're not worried about the cool, they're not worried about the brand. It has to be, this is what we do and this is how you use it. This is how we make your life better. And I feel like most organizations, especially bootstrapped startups, don't have the ability to put money toward the time, the effort, the resources, the people to develop their brand identity. A lot of the startups that I've worked with over the years, especially Jen and I work with, branding is key, and doing a branding exercise before you open your mouth is of the utmost importance. And I think a lot of people are so in it to capture their first round of funding that they want to go to market and they want to get out there and get some, but they haven't really thought about who they are. And so when, they've been up for a couple of years and we ask them really pretty basic questions about what do you stand for? What are your core values? Why are you trying to attempt to solve whatever this problem is? They don't have good answers. And so it's our job, it's our responsibility to help them define what those answers are. We're not clearly feeding it. It's about refining what their core message, it's what they already believe, but people don't spend enough time to stop and think about it. So I think, like I said, at the beginning, it's a lot about education. And then as you get a foothold in the market, you start to be able to move toward more of a branded play. Also, the other thing too, is I think, and this is especially applicable to startups, everybody gets really excited for the branded spots. They see branded commercials, they see branded content, and they really want to align their brand to it. And they want to do that because it looks super cool. And they also, they have their comps of who they think that they need to be competing with. And they see those people are 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And they're like, oh, well, I want to be doing what they're doing. Again, you have to really know what stage you're in and what is the appropriate marketing that's going to fit best for your industry, for your sector, but also for your stage of your business. Again, we work with a lot of early stage growth focused companies. They're not necessarily going to live and die on their next campaign, but they really need to start making inroads because they need to get that next round of funding, or they need to get significant downloads, or they need to get significant customer acquisition in another form. And so we really help them do that. So yeah, it's interesting to watch the evolution, and they go from this heavy education to, okay, people sort of get where we're at. I think when we're looking at Web3, there's education, but not even really. I think everybody's so excited about the tech, everybody's so excited about the future of possibility that they're talking about it in this very sort of ethereal way. And they're not diving into, as you were saying, the practical application of what this means to people's daily lives. And I have yet to see the majority of the industry start talking about it in that kind of way. And I think until you do that, you're going to run into so many scams, and people are going to lose their money, and people are going to get confused, and people are going to get turned off by all of the hype. And so it unfortunately will work against what everybody's ultimate goal is, which is to move the industry toward a Web3 lifestyle.
And I think it's really interesting there that you're saying kind of these stages. that you're seeing kind of startups go through this educational marketing where it's almost very heavy on the first half and starts to taper off? Are there inflection points that you're seeing within some of these startups that are kind of causing them to say, all right, people start to understand our brand now, we can start to get a little bit more creative here?
Yeah, I think it's on a case-by-case basis, though. I think for a lot of, at least, and really take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt, because it's really based on only the companies that I've worked with or ushered or advised on. I'm sure it could be very different for many others, but and looking back over the brands that I've helped in my career, we worked on things from a hangover gummy to to very complex technologies where data visualization is really the key that's going to be driving the education. So it has a pendulum swing, and that's why the inflection point can be very different for other people. I think you're constantly doing analysis, you're constantly doing market research, you're trying to understand what is your foothold in the sector, and once you feel like you have a confident displacement of your competitors and you have a strong foothold in the industry, you're starting to get some brand recognition, you can maybe begin to change the tide a little bit and move toward more of a branded strategy. I also want to stress this one thing. I think a lot of people are very excited about particular channels. I think digital technology and technology in general likes to lean toward digital only. And I think in a lot of ways that can be a mistake. I think studies show that above all, omni-channel approaches will always be the most successful. So if you're in a startup world and you don't have a lot of cash and you're just trying to figure out where is the best place, clearly there's a ton of things you can do for free and there's a ton of things you can do to be scrappy. But overall, working toward an omni-channel approach is going to be sort of the key for businesses that are trying to really make a difference for their company and for the industry. So sorry, to get back to your point, the inflection point is a case-by-case basis, but I think the inflection point becomes when can we finally do an omni-channel approach?
Yeah, exactly. Like you're really trying to just target an audience from any which way that they're going to be able to view the information that you're trying to display. And as these companies are growing over time, their narratives definitely do change, right? As you've hinted on, it's moved from education to more of that embodying of that brand recognition, right, for the individual consumers. So Demetrius, I'm curious on VeChain's end. I know when I first got involved looking into the VeChain technology, it was really because of the capabilities around the efforts being made in the supply chain industry and kind of how VeChain was creating, open transparency from suppliers to, the good being in my hands. But over, the last year or so that we've really gotten more involved in the VeChain community, that narrative has started to change to more of a broad scope, to where you're tapping into financial services with DeFi solutions, as well as into the NFT space with VNFTs being launched. Like, how has VeChain been able to grow over this time period and help to change that narrative to stay true to their mission at the end of the day?
Well, the narrative has never changed. That's the reality. We are always have been a layer one platform, and that's the beauty, a public layer one, which means that anyone can build. And that, I think that is the beauty of the internet. Anyone can navigate, anyone can build. So the reason, though, that I think that it started from supply chain is also because our strategic partners, as I mentioned earlier, DNB and PwC, they started mainly bringing their clients that are on the supply chain. For example, the My Story, the storytelling, the downstream storytelling of wine from the genesis part up to the bottling and distribution from DNB, or the PwC use case of Walmart, knowing the life cycle of your product you're buying. That it goes because they brought those clients up. They use our technology, our tools to bring the use cases. And I think supply chain is one of the not easiest, but it's the easier way to enter the blockchain, because there is value there from monitoring the supply chain, seeing the pain points and solving them through the use of IoT and other services like third-party assurance. That brings value that it can be seen, also is visible. And then the community decided to becoming more engaging with the tools. That's why we saw the NFTs coming up. And also from our side as foundation, we brought the VUSD, the stable token, in order for the DeFi to be expanded, even though we have decentralized exchanges on the VeChain or blockchain. So there is a balance. That's the reality. The enterprise balance from our partners, and also the community balance that brings. I don't want to call it hype, but the first use cases of NFTs and centralized finance, because I think that what we are seeing right now on the NFT space is just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, I mean, the term NFT is so much over abused and misused by everyone in the industry that really doesn't serve its core technology. And I can tell you how I draw these conclusions, because I'm giving several lectures to universities, and I came up with a PowerPoint with 2 JPEGs, and I say, this is a JPEG and this is a very nice NFT. What do you say? Yes, it's brilliant. It's the same thing, guys. This is not an NFT, because what is an NFT in reality is we associate a digital item or a physical item with a token ID, and then we transfer it or we assign it to a wallet ID. And that is the NFT. And then we have the transfer of rights, the metadata, and the minting, etc., etc. But it's not the digital JPEG, the PFP. And yeah,
like
David is laughing because I am sure, David, you have seen that as well. With our, make your painting NFT, you're gonna make money.
Yeah, and I think if anything, that maybe where we're at right now, right, with this like the profile picture craze that's basically all over crypto Twitter, like this is maybe what was needed to get the consumers to peek open the door a little bit, right, and start to see what's behind the scenes. Like you mentioned, Dimitris, there's so many valuable things that are going on the VeChain ecosystem and across multiple other layer ones, but how are they going to be able to reach the masses at the end of the day with this complex technology, unless we're able to kind of simplify it to where everybody's able to understand, at least at a ground level, like, okay, this is verifiable art, I guess, or something along those lines.
Allow me to disagree, Luke, because for example, my story from DNV, there was a QR code that if you scan, you can see the provenance of the product, and that information on the back end is blockchain. On the front page, on the landing page, it is a Web2 that's understandable by the consumer.
Right.
Other than that, I mean, the NFTs in general, it is overhyped industry. Yeah. It reminds me of a bit of, I'm relatively young, I think. So I leave the bubble of the ICOs. It reminds me a lot of the bubbles of the ICOs, initial coin offerings, that the young generation that is engaging more with the NFTs, that in their early 20s, they have no clue what is an ICO. It's, I think, reliving history. It's a cycle over and over again. And eventually, we're going to see the real use case of NFT. And I think the real use case of NFT goes back beyond history in the land law and the property law of the UK. For example, if you want to make a transfer in the property in UK, you do it through a deed. And the transfer of, and that title, it explains what it is about. It's about you own the property and comes along with third-party rights, for example, restrictive covenants. And that's actually the use case of NFT. Yeah. One of the use cases. Yeah, I think in a perfect digital democracy, the use of NFT can be used for exercising and expressing our rights. But that is, I think, down way the pipeline.
And I think it's really interesting what you just said there, because it sounds like VeChain went through a similar story that NFTs are going through right now. You found that, hey, we are a layer 1 blockchain. This has been our mission from day one. But we got this stigma of being a supply chain token, because that was where we were onboarding early users. That was where we were bringing this utility to people that were able to understand it. And then we started to have people tell the story, start to get more involved in the ecosystem because they had an entry point. And and realize, wait, we can build DeFi solutions on this. We can build VNFTs on this. And then you have communities like Mad V Apes come up and start to bring a lot of traction and a lot of growth to the whole ecosystem. And that's kind of what NFTs are doing right now. We started with this profile picture and art craze, but the utility outside of that, we're barely scraping the surface yet. And I don't think anybody realizes it.
Yeah, I think the danger, though, that we're looking at is people are going to get a bad taste in their mouth with what's happening with this current craze of NFTs, right? It's a limited understanding of what the technology is really for. Everybody looks at it like the crypto cash grabs, from 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And we're getting a lot of people who are getting burned. They're spending a lot of money on things that are invariably worthless, and they're going to pay for it. And it's really unfortunate because what it's doing is it's clouding, it's muddying the waters of what this possibly could be to change people's lives, right? I think everybody's working in Web3 with the idea that this is going to be the new landscape for how technology is going to be utilized moving forward, and nobody's stopping to think about the utility. We were talking earlier about branding. It's nobody's stopping to think about who they are before they get started. I think a lot of people are looking for that very excited cash grab of what it could be. Like Coca-Cola did an NFT where they were auctioning off something you could wear in another virtual space, kind of like Facebook's attempt, which I don't ever want to use by name. But it has utility, but is it something that's going to be long lasting? And I think you can come up with an idea of what utility is, but then is it going to be effective for the long term? And that's the thing that I know, Demetrius, you have a painting, right?
Yeah.
You have a real world printed painting, which is coupled together with your NFT of the exact same kind, right? I mean, that to me speaks to a lifelong utility that you can get out of a particular product or print or whatever it is.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, David. I mean, you mentioned about the painting, the phygital actually. The idea of the phygital came, by bridging the two worlds, the physical and the digital world. So the idea of it, unfortunately, I don't have it with me because it's in Cyprus. I'm in London. But for the audience, the painting that they is referring for is a painting that made by Anna Kuni, an artist, Ukrainian artist based in South Africa, and she did it also digitally as NFT, and we connected the NFT with a near frequency communication chip. And when you scan the NFC, you can see the whole story, provenance information of the painting along with the NFT. And I think this is the way that we're also minimizing and bridging the gap through traditional, not only investors, but also people that they are not familiar with the technology. And going even more back to Connor about the Mad V Apes, I think we discussed that a bit offline earlier about the equation of failure in the NFTs. This is how I call it, because Mad V Apes is actually doing amazing stuff, and that is my personal view. Because, but I see that there is utility, and where there is utility, there is also afterlife of the NFT or any product if you consider about it. I mean, it's beyond the technology, so always about the product. That is an afterlife of it. So, but the majority of the projects, other than the Mad V Apes, that also in the other chains are all about like this. First we do a mint, then we're doing an airdrop, then a second mint, then we're doing a token, and then what?
Every time.
It seems to be that's where these projects are starting to fall off almost, to where they've accomplished everything they needed to, but then really where does that real world application and utility come from? And so I'm curious here to David, to ask you, like, with your the clients that you're working with in quote unquote the Web2 world, right, outside of this Web3 sphere, are they starting to talk about these examples of NFTs in the real world? Have they started to bring up these Web3 concepts and terminologies? What have been some themes and conversations that you've had, if any, around this?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Marketing in general is incredibly valuable and necessary, and I'm not just saying that because I do it for a living. But it's incredibly valuable, and But it is something that people generally, any founder or CEO you talk to, it's something they don't necessarily want to pay for. They would love if the world just flocked to what they're doing already. When talking about an unproven way to market your business or brand, everybody is very gun shy. And I understand it and I respect it, because we're watching a lot of people who are making attempts, which I also respect the attempt, but then they're getting mocked in the public space. And so again, we're running into like a utility problem. Like I enjoy gaming, and there's a company called Midnight Society. If anybody on this episode is familiar with Dr. Disrespect, it's his game development studio with his partner. And they developed an NFT which was supposed to give, which does give, it's $50, and it gives you early beta access to their first game.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and it gives you, skins within the game and things like that. And I think, that is something that has utility. It's things people are willing to pay for regardless, because they're gonna, he has a huge following and people are excited to support whatever he's doing. However, he got a lot of crap for it. Because people are saying, why are you charging your fans for early access to your game? So even when he's doing what I would consider it being the right way, giving utility to something where people would naturally pay for it anyway, and you're just bringing them into this extra inclusive situation, and maybe an exclusive club, but open to the public, even then he's still getting hammered for it in the press. So I feel like it's such a minefield at this point, because nobody's really figured it out. I think there are a lot of people who are trying really, really hard, and I respect their attempts, but I don't see. I think the place that this is going to be the most effective is going to be in in-person activations.
Yes,
and it gives you an opportunity to take. And I was talking about this earlier with Tribify. It's like, how can you take this digital world and then utilize it in the real world? And I, again, am what Facebook's doing. I want to try and help people move into the real world and get as far away from what the virtual world is going to look like, because I feel like everybody needs to, have interactions, especially after the last few years.
Yes.
Humans in real spaces. So I look at this and say, okay, how can we create a brand statement and brand mission that is about bringing people together? Because a lot of brands have that, right? They're saying our brand is about bringing people together. Well, here's an opportunity. You can mint an NFT and then make a in-person activation. If you get it, you get backstage passes at a particular concert to see whoever it is. I mean, there are tons of things that you could do outside in the real world which make it like a ticket, an exclusive ticket, but it has perpetual value, right? It can be like, every time we come to your town and you want to see this particular band, you get our NFT and now you're always backstage, or always you get front row access, or whatever it is. That is something that gives you continual usage, and it's not a one and done. I think when it's a one and done, people will eventually feel burned. And the reason why I haven't had any clients who are very excited about it, and we've only had early discussions about it, is because people are, like I said, very gun shy, because they're watching people who are even considering it, like I said, doing it kind of in the right way. They're still getting burned. And then everybody's got a bad taste in their mouth because of NFTs on the other side of this, who are very uneducated about what NFTs really are, because they're watching a lot of people get scammed, and it looks a lot like the influencer pump and dump scams for crypto. You're just watching a lot of people lose a lot of money, and it's really a shame. And just like the adpocalypse that happened on YouTube, people are very wary about aligning their brand, something they work really hard to build, and then aligning it with a quicksand space. It's very treacherous out there right now, not to be overly dramatic, but there's when you get beyond the hype, you're going to find that like it's not set right now, and people want to have a little bit more of a sure bet, I think.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's absolutely not set. And I love the comment you made there earlier about the ticket, because I think that's something Luke and our team in Atlantis, we talk about all the time. In reflecting back on like a concert you went to or a music festival you attended, how many pictures did you end up taking at that event? Videos, different memories, and how many times have you gone through your phone and been sitting bored on, your couch and saying, I want to go look back at some of those cool memories? Having an NFT that was your ticket for Coachella 2022 and saying, hey, all of your memories that you took are tied to that. If you ever want to click it, you can go up and you have it there forever.
Right, and I'm not suggesting that these things should be insanely expensive, but people are throwing stupid money at these. I mean, I saw an auction for a couple NFTs. This was L'Oreal. It was one of the L'Oreal brands. They did an auction for an NFT, and it went for upwards of $3,000 plus. And the utility of that was not really all there. And not to, I'm not trying to shame the brand. I think everybody's trying to figure it out. But these things are going for upwards of $3,000, and there's no perpetual utility out of it. Was the money a waste? Not for the brand. They got a lot of good press out of it, but is that really going to sit well with the customer or the people who are not willing to pay $3,000? How are they going to feel about it in the long run? So are you eventually going to tarnish your brand, something you're spending a lot of time to craft?
David, you're totally right on that. I mean, the brands, I think, they're engaging with NFTs and metaverse as a way to show that they are cool and close to the new generation, but they're missing the utility. Sorry about that?
Sorry, I was just saying it's like NFT virtue signaling.
Yeah.
That's exactly the thing. I mean, they're engaging and they're creating their NFTs, their metaverse, just to show that they're cool. But what is the utility there? What is the afterlife of the product? How I'm going to reuse it? And what you mentioned about the ticketing and the proof of participation is something that Vitalik said back in the days. It could be used like that. And also there are projects that I don't want to call them off, but they're doing something like that. I mean, if you are a holder of that NFT, you have that special perks, you have early access to events. That is the start of the utility, of the vested utility NFTs.
Look, I'm not trying to say it's all bad either. I don't want to seem like the doom and gloom guy here because I'm the old fart from Web2. But I look at this and I'm saying, if you're a big brand and you are, is exactly what you're saying to me today, if you're trying to align yourself and do the next cool thing to look like you're a brand that's awake, fail with a way to do good for the world. I think Taco Bell had an NFT, and the use case or what was being used from the money was going toward education. So though it didn't have didn't have a long life as the NFT specifically, it did something positive for the world. So if you're going to quote unquote fail, fail with an altruistic end in mind. So while we're still figuring it out, you can still get into the space and feel like you're still a cool brand, that you're in the know, that all those Gen Zers are paying attention to what you're doing, but do it in a way that you're actually going to end up helping people. And I think that's kind of what it seems to be a little limited in people who are doing it, but I think that's the real opportunity here.
I think go ahead, Lou.
I was going to say, I think we're starting to get to that next inflection point that you're talking about there, David. I mean, news out this past week, right, of the NBA, like probably one of the largest sports, organizations out there. They announced a dynamic NFT to where it's going to be based upon the performance of players in the 2022 NBA playoffs. Granted, there's no, that last factor of the real world help that it's creating isn't quite there yet, but you're starting to get these big name brands dipping their toes in areas that they're familiar with, such as Connor and I hypothesize it's almost like we're decentralized fantasy sports coming up here with kind of these dynamic NFTs. So it's just interesting to see these really big organizations, associations start to adopt this technology.
But what's really interesting about that is that, to me, that looks like Web2 meeting Web3, because what happens when you have a Topps baseball card and the player does really terribly over the course of the season? That's going to tank the value of that particular card. So this is very similar to how the market would work for anything that would resemble, the dynamic NFT. You're going to watch it ebb and flow like the market. I think it does have some value, but eventually, no matter what, it'll probably all be worth nothing. And that's the unfortunate part about it. Because eventually people, and I'm saying, even hundreds of years, like nobody's going to think about whoever's, on the Knicks in 150 years, is that NFT actually going to be worth anything?
Right. Maybe if you're holding the MVP of the entire, finals that year, that, okay, they're going to be a staple that they had, the most impeccable playoff run that there was. But unless that's not the case, to your point, right, they kind of just go by the wayside at the end of the day.
Right. And I don't want to take away the emotional element of this. I mean, people
Yeah.
collect things because they're passionate about it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a lot of wonderful things you can collect because you're a fan. And that absolutely is something that I think has the most utility of anything at this point, because it's not about financial gain. It's not about trying to, cash in on the next thing, which is what a lot of people are pushing you towards, pushing the public toward. It's just about like what you're passionate about, what you like. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think that's kind of the best case scenario for this type of NFT. Clearly, there's a lot of other uses that I think are way more valuable, way more important. But I'm happy to be a fan. I love comics. I'd love to see more NFTs in the comic space. I think that would be exceptional.
And I think you hit that on the head. It's what are you passionate about? What do you stand by? Humans are constantly drawn to being together in a community, somewhere where we're all together working towards something. We always like to be in a group. Nobody likes to be the outsider that's just sitting there watching everyone doing everything. Everyone wants to be part of something bigger than themselves. And it's tough because you go back to what you were saying, even just a little bit earlier about, I don't want to be the bad guy here, but look what you're seeing in the NFT space. If you're not in it, you're seeing projects like Squiggles, Serial Club, that are some of the biggest projects on Ethereum a quarter ago that were blatant scams, had no intention to move forward. How are we supposed to trust that on a different blockchain or a different type of project? What's different? And I think that's still where we have a lot to learn. And it's that stickiness that I think Warren Buffett always talks about when he says, I'm investing in a startup or in a business. What is the stickiness? How many times are people going to go back? Are they going to go back to look at the MVP of that NBA tournament? Maybe. Or are they going to do something like you're a product company and instead of issuing a discount code on a paper coupon that gets thrown out in the trash, that discount code is an NFT. And if you're somebody that wants to go and buy that product, you're probably going to want that NFT in your wallet when you check out to get that discount. And say you go, I don't want this product anymore, somebody else might want it. And you can go give them the opportunity to use that, have that utility and that stickiness where you have a reason to keep coming back.
Yeah, I think you look at the landscape, and I think the places where we're going to end up seeing a lot of activity, hopefully in the short, not hopefully, is going to be politics and nonprofits. And I think those are going to be several places where after people are done with all this hype, and if I see another monkey poster, I'm going to go crazy. If you get past all of that and people start really understanding about utility, they're going to start thinking about how I want to spend my money. And if they're tying it back to their core values and why they spend the money that they do, they're going to find an NFT that represents whatever that is. And I think that's where it's going to start to explode.
Exactly. And I think it's because we're kind of walking this fine line right now is how is Web3 and Web2 coexisting? What does that even look like right now? And is that sustainable long-term? So Demetrius, I'd love to hear your perspective on that. How do you see Web2 and Web3 kind of coexisting as we move on into the future?
Well, Web3, I think came from the Ethereum co-founder, but I think also from the need of the society and what had happened with Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, that they were exploding our data back in the days. And what Web2 stands for, mainly it is about information-centric, whereas Web3 is more about decentralization and ownership of the data. But again, what the industry has been doing, the majority of the players saying Web3 is going to replace Web2. Well, it's unreal, in my opinion, because Web3 in the future is going to be a plugin, a set of tools that are going to be activated on the layer of Web2 in order to protect, own the data, and also monetize the data. Because if we consider also what are the challenges of Web3, for example, the scalability, the user experience, then we understand there are a lot of people that are not familiar with those tools. For example, the easiest example is the wallet, the MetaMask wallet, for example. You need to sign the transaction. You need to sign everywhere, or you need to store the seed phrases and not lose them, because if you forget your password, then you are out of it. So I believe that there is some transition that we should go through, and the Web3 is going to be a set of tools that are demonstrating the decentralization, ownership, and monetization of the data, other than the big information companies and search engines that are leveraging and exploiting our data even when we are sleeping. And another example of Web2 and how they exploit our data, when you are talking over the phone and eventually you see an advertisement coming up on Instagram. This is how they are exploiting our data. But I don't want to be radical like the players in the industry that say Web3 is going to replace Web2. I think, as I said, Web3 are going to be a set of tools that are enhancing the ownership and privacy of data, and of course monetization, where I can sell my data, and if I want to sell it for how much. This is how Web3 should look like.
And I love that you brought up that comment of kind of signing off. Basically, what Demetrius is talking about, that for members of the audience, is when you are navigating the Web3 ecosystem and a website wants your data, you are basically given a pop-up window that says, this website wants to do this. Are you okay with it? And you sign off with your password. So it shows a stamp saying Luke Pillarella was okay with logging into the VC marketplace on VeChain to go buy NFTs at 6:34 p.m. on April 26th. And we've got that documented. It can't be manipulated. It's black and white there for you to see. So I think that's really interesting to, kind of talk about. And I guess, David, from your perspective, I'd love to hear what you think on kind of what Demetrius sees with Web2 and Web3 working together.
Yeah, I think one of the misunderstandings right now is that people feel like it's going to be a soon replacement, when it's not, because that shows that just the information about what it is and how it operates is not out yet in any clear and concise way to the general public. Web3 sits on top of Web2 for a lot of its functions and forms. We were talking about this earlier about we were aligning it. It was akin to energy and energy policy and how that worked. And we were talking about and how coal currently is still a necessity, but it is a shrinking necessity. We're looking at green technologies being, sort of the forefront in the future, and where we will eventually all land without any ancillary dirty power production. And I feel like that's where we're going to be with Web3. I think as all of this continues to evolve, we'll eventually be fundamentally Web3, but it's going to take a very, very long time. And there's got to be guardrails within the technology, guardrails within government, guardrails all over the place in order to help this evolution happen. But it's going to be a very long time. Just like we're not giving up coal tomorrow, even though we all feel like we shouldn't need it. It's still there and will be there for quite a long time. So it's to me, it seems like that's where we're going to end up looking at Web2 and Web3 in 50 years and how far we've come.
Yeah, and staying on that analogy for a second, David, it's interesting because even when we're moving towards more sustainable energy uses, you're still going to need those natural resources in order to get the raw materials to create that hydrogen battery or that lithium battery. It's still going to need the natural gas or the coal in order to power those mining machines. And I think that's similarly what we're experiencing right now too, in the Web 2 versus Web 3, right? Like how am I logging on to my MetaMask wallet, right? You could very easily get an extension to your Chrome browser. Who owns Chrome? Chrome is owned by Google. Google is a Web 2 entity, right? Like we're not moving away from the Web 2 entities themselves. It's more how are, to Demetrius' point, these tools, right, being built on top of it to then give back that data ownership to the individual consumers and see what we want to do with our information, not just what the company wants to do with it.
Yeah, ultimately, it's not a treadmill. It's going to be a slow burn,
yeah.
Right. So it's going to take a long time, but I think it's a positive step in the right direction.
And obviously, go ahead, Luke.
No, I was just saying I completely agree.
And I was going to say, obviously, with that slow burn and that long time, we have to be telling a story to the audience that entire time to help them understand what's going on here. And so, from your perspective, David, I'd love to hear what you think that story is starting to look like and how we can start to tell that.
I think the evolution of this is going to be a lot of excitement, initial excitement,
Yep.
and then a lot of frustration. And I'm not talking about sort of the global understanding of, MFTs and Web3 and all of that, but, you guys were talking earlier about the open door, right? It's how to get people involved and having at least an experience, at least on a peripheral way. And so trying to sidestep all the noise right now and get into sort of the long-term viability and success for how that's going to impact everybody's daily lives. And I think, Demetrius, you talked about it earlier. It was about use cases and understanding how the use case is really going to drive the narrative. And that's I think that's true for really anything. People a lot of times, when I direct a commercial and I'm doing casting, we're doing it in a way that we are attempting to help the viewer get an emotional connection to what's going on screen. And the best way that you can do that is by potentially seeing yourself or a loved one or somebody you care about on screen as well. And that speaks to testimonial, it speaks to use case, it speaks to general function and how that ripples out into society. And so if we can start to define what those stories are for the public, and each new technology or each new company as they're doing it, it goes back to their branding. What's their brand story and how are they helping individuals? What sort of impact do they want to have? What are their core values? And then you take from that, you extrapolate what your easiest, most accessible narrative from that about what you do. A lot of times when we're working with clients, we are trying to take something incredibly complex, a new technology, and distill it down to its most basic elements, and then add an emotional connection to it because we want people to feel connected, and not in any sort of, not in an artifice-based way. This is, we want people to find something that's really going to make their lives better. A lot of marketing is about selling widgets. We like to feel like we're making a positive impact in people's lives by giving them opportunity to see something that they want already. They just didn't know it because they didn't know it was available. And I think Web3 is a lot like that. I think a lot of the technology and use cases that are available and available as this evolves are just going to be things that are going to make people's lives better. I'm just like anybody else. I'm very sensitive to my data being formed. Like, I don't like feeling like a commodity, and I know a lot of other people don't either. Some people say, oh, whatever, they're just selling me stuff. But at the end of the day, we know that isn't true. That's not the extent of it. So any opportunity that society has to disengage and separate themselves from being farmed like crops, I think is always a good day. So again, a little ramble, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to be about use cases and understanding how this technology is going to be effective in the simplest form, in the easiest way to understand, and then translating that a lot in many, many channels.
I have to agree. And I mean, Demetrius, what's your perspective there? You seeing kind of the same thing from the Web3 view as to how tell this story for future mass adoption?
Well, it's exactly use cases, as David said, and engagement and the feel that you give to the consumer, but not only the consumer, the feeling of belonging to the society, of being part of that notion of that cult. And that is the way. And I think also tackling the social evils, but also the problems that our planet is facing. Only then we can be part of that and move forward as individuals, but also as society. Other than that, it's important to mention also that a message to the technocrats: allow the innovation to thrive and don't stop it. And don't try to solve the GDPR, for example, loopholes with more policy other than engaging with the technology, because I think the Web3 tools have a lot of to give to the gaps of the GDPR and the implementation of GDPR, other than pushing companies outside European Union because you want to be more centralized. I believe in set of rules and in governments, but into the minimal point, so society can thrive, technology can thrive, and we can also becoming better versions of ourselves. Because a lot of regulation brings also a pushback from the society, and that's the reality.
Yeah, we're really starting to walk that fine line there of government regulation without stifling technological advancements. And I do want to bring up one thing though that I've noticed in the Twitter space, crypto Twitter, is that the VeChain community has just grown exponentially over this last year, and the value that they feel from participating in the ecosystem too. The users really feel that they're owners, right? That the thoughts, their ideas are being considered by the main developers, by the validators, and I think that that's really what's going to continue to power this move into Web3, is that feeling of ownership, right? Like how many times do you submit a comment, right, on say like Facebook or Instagram, right? That's going to get put into the backlog of who knows how many comments, compared to being in a Discord today with the main founders of a project and being right there, articulating the ideas and concepts as a community collaboratively and collectively. So it's really exciting, and I'm optimistic for what's to come.
And you're right about that, because also any vital change that happened on a protocol layer, it also went through our governance model or through the V vote. So then the holders of the VT token have a say on the running of the which is important. But at the same time, we're trying to promote and listen to what the community needs. And we're also shifting to more decentralized autonomous organizations in the VeChain ecosystem, something that our CEO, Sunny Liu, mentioned: Web3, sustainability, and decentralized organizations, autonomous organizations. That is very important. And because as we grow, it's important also the community to grow and have a say also to their projects. Therefore, VeChain would be the infrastructure, would be the highway. Whoever rides that highway, though, and what vehicle they're going to drive, it's their call, it's their own organization. It's important to mention that.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Well, I know that we're coming up here on kind of our top of the hour, and kind of wanted to just leave off with ourselves this just one kind of final overarching question for both David and Demetrius, yourself. We've really unpacked a lot of information today, a lot of good nuggets, a lot of good examples, use cases, storytelling. If you're to give our audience the main actionable insights or call outs of this event, what would you like our audience to walk away with from today's event? David, we could start with you, and then Demetrius, I'd love to hear from you as well.
I don't really have a good answer, to be perfectly honest. I think the two things that I would say are probably takeaways from my side are, let's not rush to judgment about what this world has to offer, because it is too early, which I think is also exciting because we get to decide what the narrative is. But don't get scammed, and don't pass judgment too early. I think there's a lot of exciting things going on. Keep yourself open, keep yourself careful, but keep yourself open to what the future has to hold. And then also, just because this is startup grind, I think one thing we sort of hit on here was just trying to understand at the right stage who you are as a brand, and just. I don't think any of us are confused about the fact that any single time you post something on social media, it's not an ad, because it is. So even your beach photos, that's an ad. If you're posting on social media, it's an ad. So understand who you are. Take the time to stop and think. We always send, in the beginning of an engagement, we send a creative brief questionnaire to our prospective clients. And really all it does is help them ask the questions: who am I? What do I stand for? What am I about? And what do I want to align my brand as I'm building it to? I think the most telling question that we always ask is, what does your brand stand for? What is the reason to believe? And that's really the key. It's the reason to believe. I think also that is connected to anything we're seeing in the NFT space and Web3. What's the reason to believe? And if we can articulate what that story is, I think we're going to have a lot easier time getting more people on board sooner, which will only help the industry.
Love that.
Demetrius, from yourself?
Well, I totally agree. Self-realization is very important nowadays. It's important to know who you are and what you stand for, and also be curious. Innovation without curiosity is just mediocrity. That's the reality. And I say that also of personal experience. When I joined VChain, I was a lawyer. Now I use the law as a reference and as more philosophical background. But other than that, I'm curious every day. I'm trying to learn. And so I suggest to everyone that because we live only once, number one. And two, it's important with curiosity, we thrive as society. We bring more tools, we bring more use cases. The same as VChain. I mean, we're curious as a company to bring more use cases that have value. Other than that, it's important also don't get scammed. It's important that that's the number one thing. And what I would like to say is, yeah, it's a long way to go through digitalization, and we see that also with the gap in the generations. I mean, we cannot expect to jump from A to Z when there are people that are not using computers or even a smartphone. And that was shown also during COVID, especially in Europe, that you wanted to travel through a form, digital form, and it was so hard for the elder generation to fill up the form and to rely to someone else.
I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, other than that, it's I want to invite the audience, especially the developer community, to apply for the hackathon by VChain and DevPost, and also for the foundation grant, because it's important to see the tools that they have in mind and also support them in the best way possible. Because being a public blockchain protocol, it's important also to be open. Like the internet. Otherwise, what's the point of the public blockchain, isn't it?
Yeah,
exactly. You're that highway that you're saying people can go and ride on, and whatever car you want to ride in and whatever exit you want to take, we're going to give you that opportunity. You're going to control your own destiny. We're just going to be the infrastructure that'll help you get to the journey that you want to take. And I think that that's absolutely spot on with some of the takeaways I was expecting here is just how are you telling your story, but how are you keeping an open mind to understand what's really happening here? How are you being honest and truthful to yourself about what your passion is, what your core values are when you're starting to explore some of these new projects, new technologies, just new things in your life, even outside of just what we're talking about Web3. This applies to everything. You could be trying a new hobby, watching a new TV show, a new sport. Keep an open mind and understand that, hey, people truly value this. There's community behind it. Maybe I should explore and see why. And I think that's the whole kind of growth of Web3 for probably the next decade or so, is understanding why. And really, why are we here? Why are people on this call right now listening to us talk about this? Because we're truly trying to figure out what's happening beyond the hype. Why are we really here? What is this going to do for my everyday life when I wake up Monday through Friday? What am I going to be using Web3 for? On the weekends, what am I going to be using Web3 for, if at all? And if you can't tell that story and find that stickiness where you're going to keep coming back and keep experiencing this technology, it's going to be tough to see that growth. I mean, Luke, do you have anything to add there?
I think that you hit on a lot of good final points. I mean, we're at the tip of the iceberg. I think that we've got a long journey ahead of us of kind of the adoption of this new technology and really seeing kind of how it coexists with what we know today, lowering those barriers to entry so we're able to participate more efficiently and effectively and ultimately just become more participants in the community. So for our listeners out there, get involved, get joined, connect with us on LinkedIn, find us on Twitter, and let's continue having this discussion, in our personal lives as well. But
yeah,
with that,
sorry, I was just going to say, and for any brands who are or new startups who are struggling to help tell their narrative, please feel free to reach out. I mean, I think everybody on this call is a resource, and I would be included in that. You guys can always find me at Dominic Creative on our website. And, there's many times where we don't even engage with people as clients, but we're just here to be resources and answer questions. So feel free to always connect if you find it helpful.
We're here to go on the journey together. So everyone, let's get started. Chris, you want to bring us home today?
I most certainly will. David, Dimitri, thank you so very much for your honest and invaluable insights. And I think we took a long step forward to understanding the hype versus the reality. And your input and your participation was fantastic. So thank you very, very much.
Appreciate you, Chris. Thank you.
Luke and Connor, thank you again for being the team that helped to pull all of this together. Very much appreciated. A couple of housekeeping things. Number one is this event has been recorded in full. And as soon as we get a chance to do the final edits, etc., we will be communicating with everybody as to where the links can be found. It will be posted to the Startup Grind Global website, as well as the global YouTube channel. The other thing is you will be receiving in a couple of days a post-event survey and comments form that Luke and Connor and I and David and Dimitri would love to have you share with us your feelings. Did you get value out of this? Did you walk away with things that you can implement tomorrow or next week? Or did we raise questions that you want to have answered, but you didn't hear the answers right now? Then the final thing is, this is episode 2. We still have lots of episodes coming up, and we will be announcing episode 3 here within the next probably week or so. So please stay tuned. And with that, gentlemen, thank you again very much for a phenomenal event. Very much appreciated. And Dimitri, please get some rest on our account, okay?
A little late over there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And it was a pleasure to be on stage with all of you here. And thank you for organizing that. And all the best to your next episodes. I'll be watching you.
Thank you, Demetrius. Thank you, David. Great episode today. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your night. And we hope to see you on the next episode of Bridging the Gap to Web3. Thank you, everyone.